All right, moving along to the eighth Ennead, the way of suffering. Last Ennead was powerful, was my favorite, which was the way of perfect love. And now we're going to continue on with the eighth, second to the last Ennead, which is, again, the way of suffering. Chapter 64. Desire for created things combined with the senses becomes pleasure. The senses, stimulated by desire, take advantage of the sensible object. Sensual pleasure is the mother of division, breaking the primal oneness of perfect love. Sensual pleasure is the mother of death, and the death of such pleasure is suffering. In desiring to escape pain, we seek refuge in sensual pleasure, calling it by the name of happiness. Yet in trying to blunt pain with pleasure, we but increase our pain. For pleasure and pain are intertwined. Therefore did the ancient sage cry, "O misery, happiness lies by its side. O happiness, misery lurks beneath it." Wherever there is pleasure, there must be pain. There must be pain. For through pain we have not chosen. The way returns us from illusory pleasure we have chosen. Pain forces us to rise above the realm of the senses, to live according to our true nature. Our original designation. There are two kinds of pain: pain of the senses, an absence of the object of the body's desire, and pain of the soul, an absence of the object of the soul's desire. Pleasure of the senses is emptiness ever filling itself, yet remaining ever empty. Pleasure of the soul is fullness ever emptying itself, yet remaining ever full. Therefore, said the ancient sage, what is most full seems to be empty, but in its use cannot be exhausted. Chapter 65. Pleasure of the senses is succeeded by pain of the soul, while acceptance of pain of the senses is succeeded by pleasure of the soul. The soul pleasure we call joy, the endless joy of binding oneself to the way. Thus the followers of the way gladly accept suffering. Patiently enduring involuntary afflictions, they turn them into smooth, untroubled paths. Through self-restraint, they do away with sensual pleasure, which is intricate, convoluted, wrapped around every sensible object. Therefore, said the ancient sage, the way unravels, tangles, submerges turmoil. Redirecting the impulses of their desire, followers of the way act according to nature. They no longer yearn for bodily pleasure, nor do they fear pain. Overcoming such yearning and such fear, together with the sensual love, self-love that gave them birth, they kill with a single blow all the passions. Therefore, said the ancient sage, control of the passions by will is called strength. Free from desire for created things, followers of the way pass from the outer to the inner. Going beyond superficial aspects of these things, they come to know their inner essences, as words within the primal word, thoughts of the primal mind. Therefore, said the ancient sage, the sage is always without desire, in order to contemplate the mysteries of nature. Offering themselves to him who is beyond all created things, sharing in his self-emptying, followers of the way become wholly united to him, the true goal of love and longing, the true end of and fulfillment of desire. Chapter 66. It is easy to reconcile the existence of suffering in the world, until one truly suffers. Then, when it seems impossible to reconcile the suffering in oneself, it seems impossible to reconcile the suffering in the world. Instead of an explanation to reconcile suffering, the maker of things has offered himself and his life. For he alone suffered as an absolute innocent. He alone had nothing to learn, nothing to gain from suffering. He alone, being born of a virgin, was not born out of that pleasure which must be succeeded by pain. Yet he alone lived to the full all the pain and sorrow of which a human being is capable. The suffering of the way, then, was a purely gratuitous act. In it he offered himself no false consolation, no easy escape and pleasure, such as we use every day. Sensual pleasure born of desire is the mother of death, and the death of such pleasure is suffering. In submitting to suffering and death without having been born out of pleasure, the way puts pleasure's child to death. thus giving birth to life without end, to eternal rest and stillness for those who would share in his pain. That this did the ancient sage foreglimpse and foretell, saying, the way of nameless simplicity is the death of the passions. The death of the passions will lead to stillness, and thus the world will naturally be at rest. Chapter 67. Although 3/10 of the people appear to live, said the ancient sage, they are moving in the realm of death. Why is this? Because of their excessive striving after life. After the way became flesh, people tried to escape the suffering and death of the flesh. After he came, people gladly accepted suffering and death in order to follow him. For them to be with him and suffer was far greater than to be without him and not suffer. For them there was only one way. One must mourn in order to rejoice. One must choose death to the passions in order to live. But if one chooses happiness, one will reap sorrow. And if one chooses owns one life, one will surely die. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, said the way. You who are poor in spirit, you who mourn and are meek, you who hunger and thirst for righteousness, you are reviled and persecuted. Before the way took flesh, the world did not know the way to rejoice. In poverty, sorrow, helplessness, and persecution. After he came, everything is reversed for those who will follow him. Sorrow has lost its fatal poison. Quiet hope lurks and grows in the inner recesses of despair. The weight of suffering cannot burden one unto destruction, because sweet fruit is lifted from its branches. Sorrows are a furnace in which gold is purified. Suffering is the hammer in the hand of the sculptor which perfects the statue. Even this did the ancient sage foreglimpse and foretell, saying, in many things advantages lurk in suffering, and suffering lurks in advantages. For those who follow not the way, sorrows are storms which ravage everything. For those who follow the way, tears of sorrow are a quiet rain which causes life to bloom. To those who follow the way himself said, you shall weep and lament, but the world shall rejoice, and you shall be sorrowful, but your sorrow shall be turned into joy, and your joy no one can take from you. Chapter 68. Our fleshly self desires in a way that opposes our spiritual self in the way that opposes our fleshly self. This duality within us is called the discord, the twofold struggle. So long as we are constrained by our fleshly self, we are fragmented, cut off from the unity of the way. But when our fleshly self is constrained by our will, it is swallowed up by the way's unifying power. When the way became flesh and died as a man on the tree, his spirit was parted from his body, and the veil of the temple was rent in twain. When the follower of the way dies to this life in going towards him, the temple of that person's being is likewise torn. It is rent in two, becoming spiritual like the way himself, yet not ceasing to belong to the fleshly body in which it dwells. It is torn, cutting off and tearing away the will of the fleshly self, which is sweet, but inclined to depart from the way. The heart is ripped, tearing itself into pieces, and these pieces it carries as a pure offering, a gift to the giver of life. Thus, detached from the fleshly self, the spiritual self is freed from discord and becomes a unity. Embraced and enfolded in the one, it is unified in pristine simplicity, restored to its original state. Duality is brought into subjection, swallowed up in the one. This the sage called the mysterious agreement, primal union. The primal union then comes from the pain of heart, tearing the poor heart, stripping it of desire of things created, out of the desire for the uncreated way. It is a union that comes from tearing in half. Without inner war, there is no inner peace. Chapter 69. The way calls all people equally to follow him. The call is accepted if, when trouble or losses come, the follower of the way admits that he deserves them, when he is thankful for them, when he does not count his life dear to himself and completely surrenders himself to the way. Therefore, said the ancient sage, when you are at one with loss, the loss is experienced willingly. Suffering is a true sign that one is the follower of the way, a seal of his election. He, the creator of our spirits, recreates and refashions our spirits through trials. An unutterable consolation appears in the heart, and earthly sufferings become a source of delight. A sorrowless earthly life, on the other hand, is a true sign that the way has turned his face from a person, even though outwardly the person may appear reverent and virtuous. Chapter 70. Pain of the heart endured in devotion to the way is the way to perfection. The way to the perfect humility, perfect love. Through it, the follower of the way comes to full stature. Through it, he becomes stronger. Therefore, the ancient sage said, when opposing armies are evenly matched, the one that is in grief over losses is the one that will be victorious. Without offenses, humility has not been tested. Without adversities, true love has not been tested. Without afflictions, virtue has not been tested. As soon as the follower of the way allows self-exaltation to steal into his soul, the way permits afflictions to grow and prevail, until the follower returns to the weakness and humility which is the function of the way, and thus becomes stronger. The soul can never learn the power of the way while abiding in comfort. The soul can never value the love of the way until she is in circumstances which cut off hope. The way reveals his power by saving her. The way reveals his love by giving hope where there is no hope. The way reveals himself, but only in a region of stillness, when the soul is alone, imprisoned in the heart, seeking him alone in her pain. Chapter 71. I give you no formulas, says the way. I give you no equations, but I will heal you in my own time, in my own way, imperceptible to you. Your mind races seeking a solution, but there is no solution that can be grasped by the mind. Your mind tries every avenue, thinking that at least one will open up suddenly on the longed-for goal. Freedom from pain. But every avenue is a dead end. You are up against the wall. The goal is not reached. That is because the pain is there for a reason. It is like the maddening fever that burns up that drives out the disease. But it alone do I heal you. By it alone do I heal you. Without it you will die in your sickness. But it alone do I change you into perfection. Without it you will be as a foreigner in my kingdom. Seek no formula. Seek no equation. Only be patient. Wait on me while I do my unseen work inside you. When you are changed and fit for my kingdom, you will know that something happened, and that is all you will know. But there is no need for thought. Enter then into my joy, you who have waited in devotion in my pain. Last chapter 72. His concern is not with the ideas of men, nor with their classes or states or nations or warring factions, nor with what they call their rights. These pass from day to day like clouds. Many say that he wishes us to be happy. They try to make him what they want him to be. The truth is, he cares not for that happiness. For that happiness is not real, but a dream. It too is like clouds. Clouds that change shape and vanish into air. Who remembers yesterday's clouds? Beneath the clouds is the ground we call sorrow. This sorrow is our earth, the dust of the ground, the very substance of life. Unlike the clouds, it is solid and firm. Beneath the earth are hidden reservoirs of water, and this water we call joy, a joy deeper than the happiness of the clouds. But this water may not come to the surface of its own accord. Therefore, one must labor to dig the ground of sorrow in order to tap it. Thanks for listening.